Hey everyone, welcome to the Rising Light podcast with Bryan and Melissa. Today we're going to be talking about dreams. We're going to look at a couple of Bryan's dreams, I think a couple, maybe one of mine, and we're going to talk about how dreams help on your path in life and some other things. But first, I wanted to talk about a couple things really quick. One, obviously, I'm not on camera. I, long story short, keep getting migraines on and off because I got, what do we call it? Mountain sickness.
Altitude,
Yeah,
mountain sickness, yeah.
altitude sickness, mountain sickness earlier in the month. And so my nervous system just can't seem to regulate. So I'm just trying to not be by bright lights and just kind of keep everything calm. And then I also wanted to let everyone know that I have a new course. People are beta testing it right now, but it's going really well. It's to help kind of clear everything that needs to be cleared so you can learn to trust yourself, not second guess, and just listen to your heart and take advantage of the ascension that we're in right now. So, if anyone's interested in more information on that, just let me know. I think that's all I have.
Well, I'm
Bryan,
very
yeah,
interested in hearing your perspective on this. I mean, I told you in one of our previous podcasts that I was always really skeptical that dreams meant anything prior to having some dreams that were pretty significant, which we talked about one of them, but I sent you a list of dreams that I noted in a journal and wanted to get your perspective on them. So this is something I'm very interested in since I've kind of come around on this issue. In my life. So, and I think a lot of people probably feel similarly, like how do you know a dream means anything? You know, is it just random thoughts that your brain is processing, which I think a lot of dreams can be that. I don't
hmm
necessarily think every dream is meaningful, but or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on the topic.
yeah. I think pretty almost every dream is meaningful. Sometimes it is a chunk of it is just your brain processing what happened that day, but dreams are usually have different layers. So there's also going to be meaningful messages within that dream, even if it just looks like, well, I had this dream because this happened yesterday, or I thought about this yesterday. So you mentioned a couple of your dreams. Do you want to should we just jump in with your dreams?
Sure.
Okay. So do you want to read, or do you want me to? I don't know if you have it in front of you, the Michael Jackson dream that you had.
Well, I remember it, so I can just share it real quick.
Okay.
So shortly after Michael Jackson died in 2009, I had a dream, and this was actually after the dream that I had that I mentioned in, I think, the podcast. I think we were talking about, um, what was it? We were either talking about astrology or we were talking about animal communication. Just the topic of dreams came up, and I mentioned a dream I had where I revisited the house I lived in as a child, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like an archetypal dream, you know, the consciousness of the person being represented by the house, and and it kind of having to do with unresolved issues from childhood. I had a dream shortly after that that felt like another direct message from my subconscious about a lot of what was happening in the wake of Michael Jackson's death, which for people who maybe weren't old enough to remember, or it's been so long that they don't recall, like prior to Michael Jackson dying, the kind of view of him was that he was kind of just a crazy person, you know, and I think his contribution to the world in terms of like his art, his music, and everything had kind of lost some of the potency that it had, back in the 80s and the 90s. And then when he died, it was kind of like a re-examination of like his contribution that actually like his music had a very profound effect on people to the point where like when you watch This Is It, the documentary about what would have been his final tour, the dancers who were involved in that tour were talking about the effect that his music had on them as children, and it's just this really emotional moment, where they're just talking about like the effect he had. And I think people recognize that, at least in terms of his art, that he'd had a profoundly positive effect on the world. So I had this dream shortly after he died where I saw him walking through a crowd of people in a park. It looked like it could have been Central Park. It was this really expansive area. There were tons of people. It was a huge crowd. And as he was walking by, everyone was putting their hand on him as if to heal him. And they were all silent. And he was just walking through the crowd towards the center where there was an opening and everyone was standing in a circle. And there was a woman there who looked like she could have been an estranged relative, like his sister. And he walked up to her and she reached her hand out to touch him like everyone else had done. But before she put her hand on him, he actually grabbed her hand and then started kind of caressing it as if he was trying to soothe her. And then she kind of broke down crying. And it became apparent in the dream that as he was walking by, everyone was trying to comfort him as if he needed healing, but that ultimately he was the one doing the healing in the end. So, and I feel like the representation of the a strange relative in my mind, like as I was like interpreting this dream after I woke up, was that, she kind of represented all of us who had become estranged from him, and that, he'd actually done a lot to heal us through his music. And I feel like that was kind of like ultimately like the value of his life was that he had contributed a lot to help change the world in a really positive way through his music, despite the fact that maybe his personal life, was kind of messed up. So that was my interpretation of it. Curious to hear your thoughts, Melissa, since this is kind of your more your wheelhouse. So, what's your interpretation of the dream?
Yeah, so I really like that interpretation. And like I said, dreams are there's different layers. So one of the first things I notice in this dream is you say silently reached out their hands to heal or comfort him, like laying on hands. And you also said she reached out her hand to touch him. Before her hand reached him, he grabbed her hand, right? So we have hand like 8 times in this dream. And when hands are in dreams, it represents that you are a hands on healer. And I mean, you even say like laying on hands, right? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what,
But when I wrote
yeah,
it down, I actually think I noted, yeah, it was as if they were doing the laying of hands, which is a form of healing.
yeah. So very clearly and obviously, you have that ability. And this dream was what I mean, many years ago. So I'm assuming I mean, you may have not noticed, but I'm sure you've had many other symbols of hands-on healing in your dream. So that is the main theme of this dream, that spiritual gift. And then Michael Jackson is going to represent the things you said, but because he's a singer, it also means that you have a channeling ability. But that's not the main thing that's showing up as far as abilities in this dream. It's definitely the hands-on healing.
It,
Um,
when I had the dream, I never would have thought that it had anything to do with me. So that's an interesting
oh,
perspective on this. That I thought it was just a dream about, events that were going on in the world. So you're saying it was about me.
every dream that you have is about you.
Interesting. Well, I
And
wouldn't have thought that. I would never have like seen, what was happening in the dream as like somehow related to me. But that actually makes a lot of sense now that you're
yeah,
mentioning it.
why else would you be having dreams?
I know, right? Well, there's this idea that some dreams are personal and some dreams are collective, kind of like archetypal dreams, like where things like mythology come from, where it's like stories that don't necessarily have to do with the individual, but like that mythology arises out of dreams and that it's like an impersonal kind of symbolism.
No, it's always your dream is always going to be about you. Now,
So there's some
some
aspect of
people,
it.
the majority of it, now some people can have dreams for other people, but those people are few and far between. And yeah, I wouldn't even, I wouldn't tell you, oh, look at your dream because it's probably about someone else. So yeah, your dreams are definitely about you. And I think, like I said, they're also giving you a message of usually this is something in the dream that you need to work on to better yourself. I mean, I don't really like to say it like that, but you know what I mean, right? To
Right.
grow. Um, and then your spiritual gifts are often going to show up in your dreams as well, like they did in this one. Um,
It's funny
so,
because I was told by someone that they were getting that I should be a Reiki practitioner, which
mhm.
is interesting because when my mom passed away, she actually passed as someone was performing Reiki on her when she was in the hospital. So I think somehow that, kind of form of healing with the hands was sort of had like a significance in my own life. Not that I ever would have thought that was something that I should begin to learn. So you're saying that this is a gift that, I should try to cultivate more.
Yeah, it's an ability that you have, and it's coming up in your dream to let you know that you have it. And yeah, you if you have this gift, you chose to bring it here in this lifetime for a reason, obviously to help people heal as it's coming up, as it says in this dream. I would need to either channel on it or see other dreams. Because you are outside in this dream, it's probably saying that yes, you're supposed to do it for others, right? Um, but yeah, I would need to see more dreams to know that for sure.
If you had asked me if there was some form of healing that I was trying to perform in this life, I would have said that it's partly through words, like kind of what we're doing, like
Mm-hmm.
to not necessarily this is directly healing people, but in a sense, kind of healing people's perception. Like I think trying to shift the viewpoint that like a lot of what's happening right now in the world is really negative and really kind of shifting that towards like actually there's a lot of really positive things happening and that even the
Mm-hmm.
things that seem negative are part of that like because what's loving sort of brings what is out of alignment with love to the surface. So we see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of really unloving behavior finally seeing the light of day, and whereas before it was just hidden. It's not that it wasn't happening, and so I see this kind of ascension that we're going through as sort of awakening, the lifting of the veil and things like that that people talk about. And so I've always thought of it as like, well, my healing comes through speaking with people. But even when I look at my birth chart, the area of my life where it has to do with my reputation and um, career has to do with nurturing almost like motherly energy, which is kind of strange because I have my midheaven and Cancer. Midheaven is like the area of your chart that has to do with your reputation, like what you're known for. And Cancer is the sign of like nurturing and dreams, actually. And it's like motherly behavior because Cancer rules motherhood. And so I find it interesting that's even kind of reflected in my birth chart that like my purpose in life is meant to be a kind of nurturer or healer, even though I think there's also this aspect of like with that comes sometimes like showing people things that maybe they don't want to see, or kind of showing people another way of looking at things maybe that they hadn't considered. So I always thought it had more to do with ideas and talking, but so I find this interesting, but also that it was corroborated by this other uh, channeler I spoke to who said like Reiki was meant to be like the form of healing that I performed, and they actually thought that that would be a good career for me eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, yeah, and Reiki is one way to do it, but because you have this natural ability, you don't have to do Reiki. You can just do hands-on healing.
I
You
will
don't have,
say,
yeah.
just as a side note, as a parent, so the way you kind of comfort your children and everything, I noticed that with my daughter, a lot of it requires touch. Like even as a baby, she
Mhm.
wanted to be held, needed to be hugged, needed like physical uh, affirmation of like affection. And she has Moon in Taurus, which is all about like the sensual world. So like she needs her sort of emotional security fulfilled through like kind of the sensory experience. So like touching. And so I noticed a lot of like like when she's upset about something, like I find that like oftentimes I'm sort of like putting my hand on her back or something just to kind of, it's almost just like to make her feel like there's a connection there between us. Like if she hurts herself, because one time she was running at school to like go to the park and play with her friends, and she tripped and like, fell on her knees and just like cut herself open and everything. And she was just like, you know, writhing in agony. And I just found that it was immediately the thing I did was just to like put my hand on her and just to kind of like in a way I felt like maybe it would help me take some of the pain away from her or sort of, kind of focus her attention away from where the pain was. But I find sometimes in situations in my everyday life that there's a kind of laying of hands that to me it feels like a kind of healing, even though I would think of it more just like displaying my love and affection for her, when she's upset, like most parents would, but some parents it's more of a verbal thing. And I find just for me at least that that's like a kind of parental language, it's like I tend to do it more through like comforting her, through like hugging like when she was a baby or holding her, and now just kind of through like I said, like if she hurts herself, which seems to happen all the time, just kind of like, because I think about that, like laying of hands, I think that's a lost form of healing that people don't even really consider anymore. And so even since I've kind of been reading a little bit more about spiritual healing, that I tend to think like that has an effect. And so I do it more intentionally now. When I see someone suffering, like my daughter.
Yeah, and now you know that you have that ability. And like, so when you're a hands-on healer, you have an angel or a guide that steps into your energy field and heals through you. So yeah, I mean, let's we'll stay on the dream topic today, but we can talk about how you make that connection.
For sure. Shall
So
we move on to the next dream?
yeah, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, we're talking about the one about my family, like the kind of
In the
dream about
basement
the
with the
basement.
mice.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So this is a strange dream. I think I had it a few years after the Michael Jackson dream. This probably would have been, I think it was in 2012, somewhere around there. Maybe it was earlier. I actually don't really remember. But I had a dream where I was in this house that was on the side of a hill. So when I look out the windows, I didn't really see the sky. I just saw like the hill going up, and it was clear that like the focus of the dream was like on the basement. And so there's something about just like the subterranean aspect of the house that was the focus here, because I don't really remember anything about the upstairs of the house, but in the basement, there were all these tables laid out, almost kind of like a laboratory, and there were all of these cages on them, and there were mice in the cages, and they looked kind of sickly, like they'd been there for a long time and hadn't really been, attended to and nurtured. And I remember thinking, this is my family's house, like my grandparents had lived here. And I remember just thinking about how strange it was that there were all these mice in the basement in cages. And I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, what does this mean? It was just, it was a hard dream to interpret because there wasn't anyone talking. There wasn't a whole lot of action. It was just kind of just like the seeing of the state of this, you know, house in the basement. And I thought maybe somehow the mice represented kind of like the primal nature of myself, like kind of like it's like the animalistic aspect, and it was in a cage and it had been weakened through neglect. And so somehow it was like I was ignoring some aspect of myself, just some like kind of ancient, uh, sort of, I don't know, like quality or trauma or something, that was buried in my subconscious and that I had been repressing by keeping it caged up. So that was kind of my interpretation. I actually didn't really have a strong feeling about the dream other than it seemed like it was trying to tell me something, but I wasn't sure what it was. So now I'm curious what
Yeah.
your take
So
is on it.
yeah, our dreams are always trying to tell us something. And you're right. It was, I don't know how you worded it exactly, but like a part of you kind of caged up, locked up. So cages in dreams symbolize our heart and our emotions. And mice are a Cancer symbol. And I always like to tell everyone that when we have Cancer symbols in our dreams, it doesn't mean we have or are, that we're getting cancer, it the only time you kind of need to worry about it is if you're having them cancer symbols in your dream night after night for a very long time. But in this dream, it's basically saying stop suppressing your emotions, stop putting your heart in this cage, um, and that that is a ancestral pattern, right? Like especially probably on your mom's side because you mentioned it's your
Yeah.
mom's family.
Yep.
Um, so if this was my dream, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to stop that ancestral lineage. I'm going to start feeling my feelings, feeling my emotions. Um, I would probably go back into this dream. And what I mean by that is visualize it in your head. I know we don't like to kill things, but I would take the mice out of the cage and um, you could like kill them nicely with light, with golden light,
Sure.
because then it triggers. Um, Especially if this was a more recent dream, I would do it because then it triggers your immune system to kill those cancer cells, which your immune system is already doing. But if I ever have a cancer dream or a client does, I always recommend killing the cancer symbol
You
because it just
metaphysically free them. Put
what's
it that
that?
way. Metaphysically free them.
Yeah, free them. Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. Um, but yeah, we want to send that message to the immune system. This is a threat. Make sure you're killing it. Um, so let's
Well,
see.
I've had a cancer scare. I'm not 100% sure it was cancer because I took a slightly different approach to it than most people would take with allopathic medicine.
Mhm.
I, in some ways it was, but it wasn't like the normal treatment a person would take. But I went into the hospital. I went into urgent care actually, and then eventually went into the hospital because I had sharp kind of pains in my abdomen and my back, and they thought I was having a cardiac issue, but it turned out to not be that. And ultimately, what they found is I had these pulmonary nodules, which are they kind of like tumor. I mean, they could be tumors even, but it depends on whether or not they end up being cancerous or they're kind of benign. But they're like a common kind of early stage of cancer, and so they, obviously want to biopsy them, which is like going in and extracting them and then finding out if they're, actually malignant. So I didn't want to do that right away. I had been reading a lot about alternative treatments, so I took the path of like using repurpose drugs that were off label, and they went away after about 6 months. After about 2 months, I felt the pain decreased dramatically, and so I never actually found out whether it was cancer or not. But I know that's some risk factor in my family. My mom essentially died of cancer. My sister died of cancer, so it's
Yeah.
common in my family. So it actually doesn't surprise me that even that, kind of element of like my ancestry was something that came up in the dream, when you're talking about mice symbolizing cancer. So that's interesting because that's been kind of in my immediate family, kind of huge risk factor. My mom had Hodgkin's disease when she was 21 and almost died. And so, that was before me and my siblings were born. So, I mean, this was kind of even something that she dealt with before having children. And then I think that experience is probably, you know, kind of had more of an imprint on us because of the fact that she had experienced that before we were born rather than later on after we'd already been, like born and she'd raised us and we were adults and everything.
Yeah, so that's why I think this stream is so helpful and so powerful in that it's telling you you can stop this ancestral pattern, this programming. Um, do
So,
you feel like you? So most of us begin to suppress our feelings at a very young age, even toddler age, and we put those walls up around that age. So we get very good at not feeling. And, you know, when I was first told, like, or was seen, saw in my dreams that I wasn't feeling my feelings, I'm like, well, of course I am. I feel my feelings all the time, right? Um, but there's so many times that we aren't, and we don't even realize it because we've gotten so good at it. So do you feel like you know that you suppress your feelings?
So yeah, I definitely suppress them in the sense of intellectualizing them rather than really feeling them. And I
Mhm.
know that that's part of my work in this life is to come into contact more with my feelings. And I think that's something that I've made some progress in over the years. I think it was much more of a problem when I was, in my teens and 20s. But I think because I remember when I first started reading about spirituality, I remember reading Christian Murdy and he talked about inner conflict. And I remember thinking, like, I kind of get what that is, but like at the same time, I don't actually know what that is. Like, it
Mhm.
makes sense hearing him talk about it, but I had never really noticed it in myself until I went through a breakup, a few years after that. And then I was like, oh, I know what he's talking about now. I can feel the inner conflict. So I think there was like a kind of obliviousness to what was actually happening inwardly. And then when I started to hear people talk about observing yourself, observing the thoughts and feelings that arise in you, that I went from having kind of like an intellectual understanding of what they were talking about to like an actual like direct perception of it. So I think that's kind of been my path is like going from understanding things kind of in the abstract because so I have Moon in Gemini, so that's intellectualizing emotions and the inner world to actually understanding it through direct perception of that feeling, like just feeling it essentially. So yeah, I would say that's been my experience, and I'm obviously not fully to that point yet. I do think I tend to sometimes have a hard time with difficult emotions in other people. Like if someone's really upset, it's not always easy for me to find a way to kind of walk them out of that or even just like how to even respond to it because sometimes I feel like I don't experience that level of uh, upset. I don't get like I don't feel things in a really extreme way like some people do. So someone's really angry, I sometimes find it difficult to empathize because I don't find my anger reaches like a super high level like some people's do.
Yeah. And when you say it's hard for me to walk them out of it, do you mean like anger specifically or all strong emotions?
Even sadness, if someone's really upset about something, maybe a feeling of despair, I sometimes find it difficult to relate because I feel like my sort of spectrum of feeling is like maybe a bit more like kind of it's maybe a little more narrow, but I feel like generally speaking, I'm a pretty optimistic person, and I boredom and neutrality tends to be most of what I feel is like negative emotions, occasionally stress. Like I had to go through a move a couple months ago, and that was really stressful, so I felt a drain, but it was never like I never felt like I was feeling hopeless or sad about it or whatever. It's just more like I just have to power through this and I'd rather not do this. And so it was just like resistance.
Yeah. Um, so what it sounds like is that you're um, getting better at feeling your feelings, and then just so even in times of like the move and I just have to power through this, and I get what you're saying, but it's also important to feel the feelings around it, right? And if there's any annoyance or stress or sadness or whatever. So,
Well, I felt like I was reaching my tolerance threshold at that point because, I work a lot. Like I work long hours. I'm involved in a lot of things with podcasts. I just always have a lot of projects I'm working on. And it felt like the move just tipped me over the edge a little bit, where I was like, I can see how people have mental breakdowns because life is throwing too many demands at them. I didn't quite reach that point, fortunately, but I
mhm.
was kind of like at my tolerance threshold. And so I felt like if I focus on the feeling, I'm just gonna be, I don't know, like paralyzed by it. Like I just if I spend too much time feeling, I'm just going to feel stressed out all the time, you know. But you're saying that that's not really the case. You're saying actually feeling it would be helpful.
Yeah, so we want to feel in the moment and then and do what we have to do to get it out. Like if we need to, if it's stress and you need to do something physical, if it's anger and we need to yell and scream. So we don't go like down a rabbit hole with the feeling or hold on to it. In the moment we feel it, do whatever we need to do to release it, and then move on.
Right. Yeah, what I did find I was doing was trying to reframe it. So kind of like that. Like I do have to feel it in order to be able to reframe it because when I'm looking at it and I'm trying to kind of see like, you know, right now I'm stressed out about moving, just the amount of work that has to go into that and the uncertainty about, you know, like how things are going to work out once I get moved. Because right now, like I have all my stuff in storage. For people who don't know, I had to move out of the house I've been living in for 8 years because my landlord decided to sell it. He just wanted to get out of the rental market. And so I put everything in storage. I'm living with my daughter's mom and my daughter, which has actually been really great. But ultimately, there's a bit of uncertainty in my mind right now about like, you know, where I'm going to end up. Because I don't know, for reasons that we don't have to go into, it's just the housing and rental market right now is not what it was when I last moved. So I feel like what was going through my mind as I was dealing with this was that like I was kind of looking at it more as like there's an opportunity here actually for something really great to happen, you know, even though this is really disruptive, that a lot of times really positive changes happen as a result of disruption, and that even when you're dealing with something stressful, it kind of shows you that how resourceful you can be and how you can overcome challenges. It doesn't have to be an obstacle, like because I think a lot of times people view like when something challenging happens, it's like this is a block to my happiness, but I saw it more as like, well, it's directing me towards something else and that I can't see right now because it's, you know,
Right.
later in time. And so I sort of looked at it more as like, well, I don't know what the significance of this is. So I'm not in a place to judge it. And that actually helped kind of alleviate some of that stress. And at some times actually made me feel really excited about it. I thought, well, here's a really positive opportunity. It's just right now throwing my whole life into shambles.
Right. Yeah. So mindset shifts are great, but I mean, that's something separate, right? I'm just talking about if you have a feeling, don't push it down. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
feel
I
it.
think it was kind of like the recognition of the feeling and then trying to reframe it because it's kind of like when you're afraid of something, it's like you look at what the object of fear is too. Like, why am I afraid of this thing? Like, why am I afraid of you know, like my partner leaving or something like that? And then you kind of look at like, well, I have beliefs about that. So it's kind of like using the feeling as a doorway into what's happening in your unconscious. Maybe that's something separate too, but I sort of see the value of like feeling things and seeing them as as a way of also kind of learning about yourself and seeing your unconscious beliefs and
Oh,
thoughts.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's really, I mean, that's a really good thing to do. I do that all the time too. Okay, let's get back to dreams.
Okay.
We don't have a ton more time. So let's look at another dream. I'm going to read it. It's not one of yours.
Okay.
I was inside somewhere that seemed like a restaurant with three females I went to school with. One of them had a bunch of balloons. I think someone had passed away. It was more of a funeral celebration. Someone hit one of the strings of the balloons, which caused the bunch of them to start to float away. I was able to grab them and keep them from floating off. But I still felt like I had done something wrong, and because of that, I wanted to leave. I said to one of them how I thought she would understand that feeling of not wanting to be there. So now, even if you don't know what any of the dream symbols mean, can you see what this dreamer needs to work on? Because remember, I said dreams are always going to tell us at least one thing we that they need to work on or that we need to work on. So, anything stand out to you in that dream?
would I be correct in saying, and you've never told me this dream before, so
No,
would I
it's the
be
first
correct
time
in
you're
saying,
hearing it.
yeah, would I be correct in saying that this person needs to learn to let go, surrender?
Um, yes, that could be part of it. I'm going to read part of it again. Um, I was able to grab them and keep them from floating off, but I still felt like I had done something wrong, and because of that, I wanted to leave.
I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, there's the whole topic of like uh, being afraid of being judged by others, judging oneself that, they had done something wrong. I'm sort of looking at it more like what's happening in the dream, but if there's a larger significance to the balloons and just, holding on to them. Yeah, I'm not
Right.
not quite sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are all right. The big thing to me, it like looking at it, if someone has no idea what dream symbols mean, or like even symbolic messages in dream. I mean, the streamer literally said, "I still felt like I had done something wrong," and this streamer, that's a big thing in their life, feeling like they did something wrong, even when they didn't, because she wasn't even the one that hit one of the strings of the balloon. But she grabbed them and kind of kept them from floating away.
Oh, okay. So what about trying to fix other people's problems, trying to be
Um,
the one to save
yeah, I
people from,
don't. Yeah, that's probably something the streamer does too, and that is in their little bit. But I think the most obvious is felt like I had done something wrong when they didn't. So, um, and then wanting to escape, like leave, like I can't be here because I did something wrong.
right.
Um, so for this dreamer, well, and let's look at the dream a little bit more too. So she said it felt like a funeral, but more of like a funeral celebration. So funerals are about letting a negative influence go. And you said that too, right? About
Yep.
the letting go, needing to let go. You didn't tie it to the negative influence, but kind of the same. I mean, same thing. It's another way of looking at that. Um, so when this client came to me, we talked about the dream, but my team of angels and I also did work on what she needed to let go. And so we did a healing, and this channeled message came through from the angels. They told her, and I'm just sharing this because it's cool that we can use dreams specifically to see, okay, what do we need to work on? And then the angels can help you with it. And then they had this message for her. You are a child of God and you have done nothing wrong. You are held and loved unconditionally. They tell her again, she's done nothing wrong. Everything is for learning and growing. It's impossible not to feel like you haven't done anything wrong because of other people's limitations, standards, and expectations. So basically, like on the earth plane, until you've grown, healed whatever needs to be healed, you're going to feel like if that's a limitation, if that's something in you, you're going to feel like it because you're being because of other people's limitations, standards, and expectations. Like they told her, you're expanding exponentially, even when you were a small fragment of what you are now. When life was much harder, when you were not where you are now, you still did nothing wrong. Um, it's okay. Sorry, they say you were learning and you were growing. They're talking about past lives there.
Okay.
And your mom's expectations, feelings, emotions, problems, limitations made you feel like you were doing something wrong in this lifetime. Even as a little baby, you felt like you were doing something wrong, but you weren't. You weren't living up to her standards. Your basic needs were bothersome to her because of her own mental state, but that's all that it was. You weren't actually doing anything wrong. Let's just keep reiterating that. They were clearing and releasing all of that. They say you've now reached a greater state of freedom. You're free from those ties. You can release those binds. Those binds have been released. So this is the message that's coming through as they're doing the healing. And you're expanding. I say allow your heart chakra to open and expand even more. Um,
Well, I have a question real quick.
yeah,
Do you find that dreams tell people how to heal? Like, it might tell you like where you need to be healed, but do you find that the dream also tells you the solution to the problem it's describing?
I think that can be the tricky part that it sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. That's why I feel very fortunate that I can work with people and we can just work with the angels and they can do the healing. And then we can also brainstorm of, okay, what can I do? What can the person do in real life to continue that healing?
Right.
Um, because I always say the angels clear stuff, they'll clear programming, they'll clear limiting beliefs, they'll clear, the issue the streamer had. But then they always say, but the person has to be an active participant. So if we clear not feeling, well, let's say being afraid of being seen, right? Wanting to stay small. If we clear that, but that person has had a habit of 30 or 40 plus years of staying small, of not wanting to be seen, that habit is ingrained in them, right? And that's how their brain works. So then they have to be an active participant to make steps, do things to be seen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So yeah, and then they just kind of in this healing, then they're just talking about clearing and releasing more. So so yeah, so that's one way that we can look at a dream, then bring in the angels, do some clearing on it.
How much of healing do you think people can do for themselves? I mean, I imagine like in the absolute sense, like everything can be healed by an individual, but practically speaking, is it more common that people need someone else to help them heal spiritually? Like someone that does something like what you're doing, like with the angels and with interpreting dreams and clearing uh, traumas and things like that. Like, is that something that people need to seek out someone else for typically, or can people do these things on their own? And is it practical to do that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person and where they're at in their spiritual journey. So a lot of us agreed to come here during this time to do these things, do these clearings and healings and whatever else. So we act as a conduit. So that's why we're needed. The people that do these kind of clearings and healings, it's not that they're better than anyone, but they're usually at a higher vibration. So, like I said, we work kind of as a conduit. And when I first started on this path, I seeked outside people, right, to be that conduit for healings and clearings. Now I'm at a point where I can just do it myself with my team of angels. So if someone can channel and has healing abilities, can they do it for them? Do it on their own? Yes, probably. They might need to get to a certain vibrational level. And when I use those terms, I don't mean like, again, anyone is higher, like better than anyone else, right? It's just a frequency that certain people are at. So does that answer your question?
It does. And actually, I know someone, a friend of mine, who struggled with addiction earlier in their life, and now
Mm-hmm.
they've become someone that helps other people heal from addiction. So, like what you
Yeah.
were mentioning about how you sought out outside help in order to heal some of the traumas and issues that you
Mm-hmm.
had, and now you're able to not only heal yourself, but heal other people. And I find
Mm-hmm.
that's actually a really common thing. Like the person who is wounded and is able to heal then goes on to heal other people. And actually having had that wound, whatever it is, whether it's addiction or, abuse or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
abandonment, that helps the person better heal people who are experiencing those same forms of trauma.
Right. And another natural spiritual ability that you people either have or they don't is counseling, a counseling ability. So I would guess your friend probably has that, right? And
Oh yeah,
then
definitely. That's
yeah,
their vocation now.
yeah. And counselors are born, not made. So that's why sometimes you'll go to a counselor or therapist and they're just not great, and that's fine. But then you'll sometimes just meet someone naturally and you just end up telling them all your problems, right? They're not a therapist, they're not technically trained in it, but they have that natural ability. So yeah, so that for that person it really worked out well.
Well, before we wrap this up, or I guess just as closing thoughts, like what do you think people can do to better utilize their dreams for healing, self-knowledge, things like that? I imagine writing them down is a good starting point, but I'm curious what else you think would be helpful for people.
Yeah, definitely write them down, and then start looking at maybe some common themes you're seeing in the dreams. And um, sometimes it's good to go put yourself back into the dream and pick out that feeling, how you feel in the dream. Because even if you aren't sure of what the symbols mean, and there's a lot of not great stuff out there online when you just look up symbols, that it's just not accurate. So sometimes if you put yourself back in the dream, kind of pick up the feeling, um, you can just kind of go from there of like, how do I feel in this dream, and what do I think the stream is trying to tell me as far as what I need to work on. And like I used as an example with that dream we just did, even if you don't know the symbols, you can say, okay, this dream is trying to tell me something I need to work on. And in that dream, it was like really clear, like, I feel like I did something wrong. So then maybe ask yourself, do I feel like I do things wrong a lot? Am I hard on myself? Um, so that's where I would start.
Well, it sounds like the main thing is that there's many different levels to the meaning of dreams, and you've kind of shown me some of the deeper levels that I never would have even thought to interpret them, like the dream about Michael Jackson being about me on some level. So I think it's also helpful too, maybe to talk to people who have a lot of experience in dream interpretation if you want to go, to a deeper level than what you're finding when you're looking at it yourself, like my interpretation versus yours. So if someone wanted to uh, seek out a dream interpreter, I mean, that's something you do for people too, right?
Yeah. I think I would ask, have them ask themselves, do I want to know what this dream is telling me just for fun? Because that can be fun, right? Or do I want to look at it and know, oh, I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to, I'm on this path of growth or whatever. Do I want to look at the dream and learn how I can grow? And if that's the case, then yeah, um, they can definitely, that is definitely something I do. I can give them an interpretation of the dream, and also like, let's look at how your dream wants you, and I say your dream, but like your higher, this a message from your higher self. How does your higher self want you to improve? What are they wanting you to do on this journey, this incarnation? And then, yeah, so then we can look at that. And like I said, bring in the angels, because that clears stuff really quickly. And then, yeah, look at maybe some habits they need to change to keep on that path of what the angels have just cleared.
That's a fascinating topic. I feel like we could have talked for like 3 hours on this because I had a whole list of dreams. I mean, I sent you like at
Yeah.
least a dozen. So, but really fascinating. It's got me thinking more about other dreams I've had and, maybe looking at them in a different way. And yeah, it's a topic we'll have to revisit at some point too. I think there's definitely more here to explore. But yeah, thank you again, as always. It's been a pleasure. And
Okay.
yeah, anything
Yeah.
else you want to add?
No, just yeah, thanks for being here. It was fun, and I guess we'll see everyone next time.
Sounds good. Take care.